I'm Louise Kennedy, the founder of Oculus HR. Welcome to Mind the Generation Gap. I've spent my career helping people work better together. And right now is such an interesting time to be in business. We're seeing a real shift in the workplace as different generations start to bring new ideas and also opportunities. In this series, I want to look past the headlines and also explore how that we can bridge the generation gap. I'll be talking to business owners, educators and the next generation to hear their stories and really find out how we can work together to future-proof our businesses. Today we've got Lewis Hutchinson with us, who is a Gen Z, who has a business himself and also works full-time as well. So do you just want to give us a little bit of an overview about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so first off, thank you very much for having us. Like Louise
You're
mentioned,
welcome.
I am a Gen Z. So so what I do is I lead social strategy at an award-winning agency in Newcastle called Bumbl. And then most recently I've set up a software development agency for the hair and beauty industry, where we develop booking systems. And that's probably the most recent side hustle. And the social media agency that I work at is my full-time job. So balancing working a side hustle and then also working a 40-hour full-time job. Yeah.
So what made you think about, because obviously it's a completely different, hair and beauty booking system. What made you come up with that idea to do that? Where did that come from?
So it was quite accidental, actually. And the way that I come about is somebody asked us if I could do it because they knew that I was within social media and digital, and often these lines get quite blurred. Often people think that, like, if you can do one thing in digital, you can do absolutely anything. And to be honest, at the time, I didn't actually know how to build a booking system or do any development. But I've always had like a bit of a yes, can do, and if I can't, then I'll find out attitude. And it's always been like that since being quite young and problem solving. So somebody asked us if I could do it. And I said yes. I went, yeah, of course I can. Without really knowing how to. Went away, done a little bit of problem solving and approached it with a I can attitude. And the birth of Cura happened, really. And we've been going since November. Doing this, I like to call it me 5 till 9. So I'll work me 9 till 5 and I'll come home and I'll work me 5 till 9 and do that on a night. So it was quite accidental.
And so you're kind of early doors of setting up this business. And how are you finding that? Because it's completely different to being employed, isn't it? How are you finding? Well, I suppose initial question: setting up a business. How are you finding that?
It's challenging. It's challenging. But I think this is a good way to go into the fact about identity. Ever since being young, I always knew about what my identity wanted to be and really found that quite early on. So go back to your question about how do I find it? Yeah, I find it challenging, but I find it really exciting. And I can apply a lot of the things from my mentors in my job that I have. Greg and Lewis, the founders and directors of Bumbl, are great mentors as well because they started their business and they were founder. So I apply a lot of the learnings from what I get from them about running a business and then apply it to my own. And it's really exciting. Like,
it's an exciting way to be able to do it.
There's something just about the hustle that I love. Now, passionate about hair and beauty, I'm not going to lie, I'm really quite apparent. I'm not amazingly passionate about hair and beauty and stuff like this, but the passion of the hustle and the grind and actually getting after something and building something, that's what I love doing.
The idea of the entrepreneurship part of building the business.
And do you know what it is? It's not of a case of like the materialistic values and stuff like that comes with it. To me, it's more about like I can do that. Like I've actually built something from the ground up. I've took something from nothing into now within like these last 3-4 months to having a steady few clients. Delivered on a good few projects. And I look back and think, wow, I went from not doing a lot, not having any business and working full time to now working full time and building and helping something for someone. So it's exciting and rewarding at the same time.
So you're enjoying doing it. So
love it.
What would you say would be the biggest difference between being employed and self-employed? Because you're doing them both, running side by side. But how do you? Well, it sounds like you've got a good role in the business because obviously you seem like you've got the mentors, and so they're obviously the business ones have been very supportive. But what would you think would be the main difference between the two?
It's definitely responsibility. Now, working at Bumbl, I've got a lot of responsibility within that team, but we work together as a team and we approach projects together. and you've always got people to bounce things off. Now, you go into work, you're there with your friends. I think the main difference is, especially for like a solo founder like me, is doing a lot of things on your own when you're used to working with a team of mentors and people to lead you in the right direction. You know, you can often, when finding something yourself, like what I've done with Cura, a lot of my decisions are based on gut feel.
Yeah.
And I don't actually think you can teach that. You can't teach the idea of gut feel and going down the route and just finding out something works. And if it doesn't, then you haven't got a team to go back to. And it's also a little bit about, you do get a little bit more freedom, I believe, when working for yourself. You can make your own decisions. But also the biggest thing is, if something does go wrong, it's solely responsible.
Yeah,
down to myself,
you,
and we can't bounce that around with other people. So
yeah. So do you think there's some quite clear differential?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
How long have you worked at Bumbl? Because you haven't done the traditional kind of go to college, go to uni route. So how long have what kind of from leaving school? What have you done?
Yeah, so this is actually like quite a story that I'm proud of and actually makes up my identity of what I do. So I've worked at Bumbl for 18 months, to answer your question, but the story actually about how I got hired at Bumbl is actually quite relevant to the topic that we're discussing today. So I think we should talk about that and spend a little bit of time on it. So like I said early on within my life, I knew what my identity was, and if there is any other Gen Zs watching this, my biggest number one tip, or the first tip I'll give today, is really understand who you are quite early on and do a lot of work of finding out who you want to be.
Do you mean from like your own personal values point of view?
Personal values and who you want to identify as, because I think everything stems from the person that you identify as. So for me, it was always to be a social media strategist and then now a business owner. And now that I've got that identity, I've been able to build the habits to go ahead and really
develop it further.
Exactly that.
And do you think that comes from kind of understanding yourself personally?
Yeah.
That you know what the next step was going to be,
Yeah.
or kind of what you were planning the next short-term step was going to be.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. So, like I said, I knew what my identity was going to be and I knew what I wanted to do. So I left school, and actually my first role wasn't in anything to do with marketing, so maybe contradicting what I said a little bit there, but it was to work at Nike. And I was a sales associate at Nike. And a funny thing is, like, I've never actually applied for a job through the traditional Indeed or handed in my CV like through these applying platforms. I've always went face to face and asked someone. So I remember me and my dad were shopping at Nike for some shoes, and they weren't necessarily hiring, but I looked around and I thought, I would like to work here. So how can I stand out amongst the pile of CVs that are either in the manager's inbox or landing on the desk? And I thought, well, look, just go, the manager's there right in front of them, they were literally serving us. Why don't you just ask? Be a little bit brave and be a little bit bold and different. And I managed to get that job. And the takeaway that I had from that job was, I really believe any 16, 17, 18-year-old should be put in a position where they've got to speak to people. I speak to a lot of 16, 17, 18-year-olds getting started on the journey who really struggle to have a conversation like you and I are having today, Louise. And I find it fascinating.
Do you think you learnt more by having that role at Nike about how to have those conversations? Do you think it was quite a crucial point in career-wise?
Yeah, massively. Because everything that you do in life, you're somewhat selling. So, for example, when I speak to a client, even just in the initial phases, you're selling the idea of the business. In my day job, if I'm pitching an idea, it's not necessarily that you're just giving your opinion on that idea. You're selling that idea into the overall strategy or the overall approach for that specific client. So when I was working at Nike, forcing myself into a position to speak to somebody every single day, hundreds of people come through that door, so you've got hundreds of opportunities to either meet somebody who's going to teach you something, or on the other hand, force you into a position where you're uncomfortable with thinking like, oh, I've got to speak to somebody here. And I think that's one of the main things that younger people need to start really learning, is just how to converse with one another.
And do you think that's something that doesn't come from school? Yeah. You just become quite...
Well, I think so, because I think the educational system currently actually encourages people to like shy away. if you think about like teaching a class of 30 kids,
Yeah.
you'll naturally get them people within the back of the class who sit with their head down, might be really naturally intelligent, but aren't forced to speak up and show themselves and present the skills in front of, you know, whether that's a class and that can be transferred into presenting when you're older, or, you know, whether that's actually speaking to a partner and doing partnership work, and that's learning you how to work with a team. I don't actually think, well, I don't know, I'm not in school, it might have changed, it might have changed now.
No, but just from your experience, as you say, kind of being
In my experience, it was always the people who sat at the back of the classroom and didn't actually have to see a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that now, due to the rise of social media, people can just text on the phone, not necessarily pick up a phone and phone each other. It's getting exemplified through that. That's a little bit of a tangent.
Yeah. So back on your pathway, so you worked at Nike for a period of time, which has helped you from a social point of view to be able to get out there.
Exactly that. And then I also, so after working at Nike, this is actually how I found Bumbl. So I went round and got a list of 10 agencies within the Northeast that I would want to work for. And Bumbl was in that list. And I was about 17 or 18 at the time. And I seen that they were hiring. And I seen where they were based. And I actually went in and knocked on the office door, got the receptionist to pull Lewis, our creative director, probably out of a very important day, to come and speak to us, and have a conversation. And at the time, there wasn't a natural role for us to fit into, but 2 or 3 years later, I got a phone call off Lewis asking if I was looking for work.
All right, okay. So the fact that you'd gone and put yourself out there, he'd remembered you having the conversation. Did you maintain any contact during that time or not? Or?
Yeah, so Greg is the founder, and then Lois is Greg's wife. So they obviously both converse a little bit about us, and we remained in contact on LinkedIn. They both seen what I was getting up to, and obviously I made a little bit of it. Well, I must have made an impression. And I think if I just applied through Indeed or didn't go through a completely different medium to what everybody else was, I wouldn't be.
You just would have been one of many.
I would have been one of many. And I think you've got to make the difference.
Yeah. Do you think there's many people or many Gen Zs, and without stereotyping kind of here, do you think many would go out and do what you did and actually knock on the door?
No.
You've done it twice there, haven't you? You've done it with Nike and then you've done it with this situation.
And I miss a role in the middle as well, which was Onyx Health.
Right.
And I'd done the same there.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I'd done the same there as well. I found a contact within there, started networking a little bit and done it there.
Right.
But answer your question, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. I've spoken to Greg and Lois about this, and I asked, I says, has anybody done it the same way that I've done it? And they went, nah, not really. And they don't actually see that happen quite a lot. And I'm not sure why. I was actually in the sauna the other day, not to be cliche, but I was in the sauna with a young lad, and he was applying and not getting anywhere. Yeah. And I said, look, why don't you try and go down a different route and try and be the difference? Yeah. Whether he has done that, if you're listening, get in touch, let us know. But maybe.
I think that's the difference, isn't it? It's about how do you stand out to be something different, isn't it? You know, we were talking to people that were going to be graduates this year, and actually the amount of pressure they were putting on themselves to be different, as in, you know, part-time jobs and volunteer jobs, helping out with sports things, helping out with kids, and because all of that was really amounting together, that actually when they put the huge amount of CVs in from maybe graduate schemes or something, really what they were saying is how we're going to be different, why are they going to look at me as opposed to somebody else. So do you think it sounds like it's a difficult marketplace out there, really? I mean, obviously you've done it a different route, but
it is difficult, and I'm not going to lie. Probably now with the increase in the use of AI, I think that will replace a lot of junior roles. A lot of founders and directors will be looking at these junior roles and thinking, you know, I've got to pay a junior or a graduate X amount a year to be able to bring them on, when I could get an AI agent to do the same for 10 times less the price. And I think this may be discouraging a lot of young individuals from going into places and speaking about it. But I think it comes down to how much do you want it.
Yeah.
Like,
how much you're prepared to go out and do.
Yeah.
Because the difficulty is, I mean, obviously, I agree, probably businesses are going to take, use AI as a tool. But then they're not going to have that next level of people coming through, is it? Because the younger people, therefore, aren't trained, or they're not experienced in a particular area, they can't then get the jobs to be able to move through to the next level up, isn't it? So there'll then be this shortage of gap, really, won't there, that we won't have that middle group of people to be able to move into.
Yeah, and, we can't see as far in the future. We can only really understand what's happening in the present.
Yeah.
And you never know. We all might be replaced in 10 years' time. Might not be you and I sitting here, Louise. It might be two agents speaking to each other. But I think you've got to focus on the now and think, look, there's still plenty of opportunity out there if you want it enough.
Yeah.
And, go out there, be different. Start networking, start making relationships with people within the local community and business owners like yourself. Because I think that's where a lot of value comes from. Is I never went traditional, never went uni, and I found a lot more value in actually finding mentors and people who have done a lot and experienced it.
So, I mean, you've talked about mentor a couple of times there. Is that just been something that you've recognised as being something that's been important to you, or is it something that someone suggested to you? Without being, patronising, you're young to think about having a mentor.
Yeah, of course.
And actually, from kind of my point of view, I'm kind of late 40s, and I probably wouldn't have thought about kind of mentors until late 20s, early 30s, and even then I was working full-time in a job, and actually just wasn't something that was spoken about. So was it a conversation that someone had with you, or was it something that you just read about or learned about, or how have you got to that point of having a mentor, or realising the importance of having a mentor?
A mentor can give you ridiculous more amounts of value than what any textbook or what any Google search or university degree can.
Yeah.
And I learned that really early on. I met a gentleman called Stephen Parker who runs an agency here within the northeast of England when I went and done my professional exams. And, I was actually learning a lot more from just speaking to him than necessarily what was in the textbook.
Yeah.
And I realised that really early. So when I was looking for my role at Bumbl, I thought, look, I don't necessarily want to go into a role where I'm going to be managed or, people are going to be looking over us saying, do this, do that, do that. The way that I am taught and managed at Bumbl is be shown how to do something and then take the lead and learn from where they've went wrong.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't know, I haven't been to uni like I've mentioned, but I don't think you're going to go into a uni course and they're going to say, well, in the real life, this is what you don't do. If a client's giving you a little bit of bother, this is not how you deal with it. And a mentor can just teach you so much.
Do you think part of that is around you've built some resilience because of being able to do what you've done? So actually, a client maybe is pushing back on you, to be able to say, well, actually, I don't like that, or that's not great, or actually, I want to do it this way instead. Do you think that's built up resilience, which is kind of give you more kind of strength and comfort about who you are? Yeah.
And one of the mantras that I live by is fail fast.
Right.
Because I really believe that you learn a lot more from your failures and what not to do than what you can do from your wins and your successes.
And do you move on fast when you fail fast?
You've got to.
Yeah.
You've got to move fast. You can't sit and dwell on the things that you can't change.
Yeah.
And I often think right, either this isn't going to be a problem next week or if it is, I can solve it.
Yeah. So it's kind of that. So do you not see things as challenges? Do you feel as though you kind of move things on that quick that actually, it might have been a challenge, but actually you move on that quickly that you don't focus upon what the problem's been?
I just see them as problems to solve.
Yeah.
I see them as problems to solve. There's nothing that can't be solved with a little bit of resilience and a little bit of know-how.
Yeah.
And I think this goes back to the point about having a mentor. Sorry. I think this goes back to the point about having a mentor, is that if something goes wrong and there's a problem to solve, you can go and ask. Like, say, for example, now I had a problem and I was working for yourself, Louise, I'd say, look, Louise, this is what the challenge is. This is what we've got to try and get solved. How have you had this problem and how did you approach it?
Yeah.
And if you did approach this problem, have you ever approached it in the wrong way?
Yeah.
And what wouldn't you do?
Yeah.
I think you can learn a lot more from what somebody wouldn't do than what they would. Yeah, because you know what to avoid.
Yeah. And obviously some workplace is quite difficult because you're very, it would seem to be very honest and you're very clear at communicating. And I don't necessarily think that's always the case, you know, with younger people.
Yeah.
They kind of have that expectation that it maybe comes from someone who's, you know, older from them, or people who are managing them in a business. And that is quite a difficult situation, isn't it? Because actually there's probably a bit of a stand apart of, you know, Gen Zs that are coming through that are expecting things, but actually they don't know what they're expecting, but they do expect. But then there's also that management element of it as well, isn't it? Of how people manage people who don't know what they expect.
Yeah.
It's quite a big void, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think especially for people hiring Gen Z, like myself, they've got to be able to manage Gen Z's expectations.
Yeah.
Gen Z now are like exposed to the ultra elite on social media. And despite working in social media, I know that the UK are debating like similarly to what Australia done and banning under 16s from social media, and I agree with it.
Yeah.
For the reason being of that, it creates unrealistic expectations which often lead to disappointment.
Yeah.
I think Gen Zs can either start up a business and expect everything to go great and be driving a Porsche by next month.
Yeah.
Or it's a case of that, you know, they're going into a business and I, you know, I've done this, expecting, why am I not getting promoted? Why am I not getting more? Why am I not getting more opportunity? And I think you've really got to be patient. But I think teaching patience also comes from whoever hires a Gen Z and just setting them realistic expectations and giving them great path and direction. Because I think a Gen Z that goes into a business lacking direction can often just be wandering on a path and often have a lot of decision fatigue, because there's so many ways that Gen Z can now make money.
Yeah.
They've got so much more opportunity than
what people would have had in the past.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's just a very fluid, you know, actually you can be employed, you can be self-employed, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be anything you want to be.
Yeah.
Do you think that is more available?
Yeah.
Than I know that you don't know from the past, but like from your experience, do you think that's now more available?
I think so, yeah.
And do you think that comes from that exposure to social media, being digitally connected and showing what people have or what they could have or what their expectations are? Do you think people then, do you think they build that up and think, well, actually I can have anything that I want as well?
Yeah, I think so. But I think there's a positive and negative effect of both of this. The positive effect is that it allows people to really chase their dreams and do what they want. I think previously a lot of careers or roles would have been inherited from either the parents, or people might go into the parents' business, or somebody knew somebody at a business and went into it. And that's been the case for myself in a role or two. But the negative side of that is I think it creates like this idea of overwhelm and manufactures excuses for Gen Zs not to take a direction.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's why Gen Zs get labelled as lazy.
I was going to say there's a label of being lazy or being entitled. What do you think when Gen Z are labelled as that? Because obviously you're not. You know, you obviously do the two jobs, your job and your business. So what do you think when that's kind of the label that's put on the stereotype of?
Being Gen Z myself, I try and look from somebody else's perspective, and I think, you know what, I can see why. Because it might actually look like Gen Zs are sitting around not doing anything. But I think what they're sitting around doing is trying to understand what they want to be.
Yeah.
And when you've got so much choice, it's a case of like, I've got so much things to choose from. Is that going to be the right decision? Is that going to be the right decision? And I think that's why it goes back to my original point about understanding your identity.
Yeah.
If you understand who you want to be and what your values are as a person, it's a lot easier to start understanding what direction you want to go and not be so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And that's, I think now I'm 20-year-old, turned 21 in April, and I think that's why I'm still quite early in my career, but I've been able to progress quite quickly because I understood what I wanted.
Yeah.
Whereas for somebody that doesn't know what they want, it's a case of like from the outside it does look like laziness.
Yeah.
But I think as a Gen Z being there, it's a case of overwhelm.
I was going to say it's just the pure amount of information that's coming through. And we were just talking before about kind of the information that comes is very sharp and quick. Kind of, do you watch a movie? Do you have the attention span to be able to watch
the old
a movie?
attention span conversation.
Do you feel like you have got the attention span, or does it really take quite a lot of effort? I know you're busy anyway, but does it take quite a lot of effort because you're so used to that quick turnover?
there's no doubt that attention spans are shortening, but I've got a slightly different opinion on this. I don't think that attention spans are necessarily shortening, yet becoming more selective.
Right.
So with me, I'm very much more selective about where I put my time and where I put my attention.
Right, okay.
So to me, like, watching a movie, I'm like, that doesn't really do a lot for us.
Right, okay.
So I don't think it's a case of that I wouldn't be able to sit through a full movie. Because if that movie really, like,
something that you really
wanted to watch,
yeah,
you would sit through it no problem.
Yeah.
And it creates this paradox in between, like, is it shortening or are people just becoming more selective?
Yeah.
And I wrote a little piece on that as well. So that's why, like, I understand about it. So.
And it is quite a difficult thing, isn't it? Another question would be, so how often, you're obviously on social media for work, but for your own personal time on social media, how long do you think you would spend a day on social media?
I'm going to pull my face at this because it actually is shocking, you know, and I'm seeing people shouldn't spend time on social media. I should probably take my own advice, right? So if you are watching this, do as I say, not as I do. But it is frightening, the amount of time that I probably do spend on social media, and it probably is exemplified due to the fact that I'm on there for work. My business is run off social media. I talk to a lot of people through social media. But I think, who was it that come out the other day? There was a study, somebody made that was it. The owner of Meta come out, start that again. The director of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, said that 16 hours a day worth of screen time is normal. And I'm like, what?
I mean, that's a ludicrous. I mean, obviously, we're all on screen time for work. You know, it is one of the big things, isn't it? But it is then a huge amount of time through the rest of the day, isn't it? And it comes back to the point of being overwhelmed. You know, if you're continuously, and obviously work, you know, is more structured. But for you being at work, actually, your work is social media. So actually, you're still probably scrolling, comparing, looking at competitors, you know, looking at what's the right thing for clients. And so you're doing your research into it. So actually, your access to it is continuous, isn't it?
It is, but it's really dangerous.
Yeah.
And this is why I think, like, you know, the mental health of young men, young females within Gen Z, you know, it is struggling and it is quite evident.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fact that there's just instant availability to unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
You know, I could pull up my phone now on Instagram and show you, like, look, there's an 18-year-old driving a Ferrari. There's a 20-year-old driving a Lamborghini.
Yeah.
There's a 22-year-old claiming he's just made 100k this week.
Yeah.
And people sit there, and when they're constantly scrolling and that's getting ingrained into their head, you often compare others.
Yeah.
And it's going to sound cliche, but, you know, comparison is the thief of joy. When you compare yourself to others, it's a case of, like, you're stopping yourself really understanding what you have achieved. You know, they might have just, for example, in the gym that week, might have just lifted a new personal record. And because they've just seen somebody else beat that record, they think, well, I'm not good enough. I need to do more.
Yeah.
And they're constantly chasing what's not attainable.
Yeah.
They're always chasing the next high, or they're always chasing that next hit of dopamine. And it's an addiction in itself, social media.
Yeah. And obviously you're talking about the mental health side of things. From your friendship group or people that certainly you know, have you seen an impact on people's mental health because of, well, social media, but in general being a Gen Z? Have you, and I know mental health is an issue across kind of, you know, all generations and for all many different reasons, but have you seen the impact of it because of social media?
I think people are definitely spending a lot less time in person with one another.
Yeah.
I think COVID, I'm not sure if I can say COVID still, if it gets censored, we can't say that now, can we? I think COVID didn't help things for anyone, whether that's mental health, but it forced people to get on social media and start that being the usual norm and not usual route to go down to speak to each other. So I think the fact that people aren't spending a lot of time with one another, conversing, it creates this feeling of like, oh, well, I can just hide behind in my bedroom and I don't need to go out and start speaking to my mates. And that is quite tough.
Yeah. So kind of just thinking about that contact side of things, when you work at Bumbl, do you go in the office every day, or are you kind of a bit mixed? Do you do a hybrid working, or? Monday
and Friday we work from home.
Right. Okay.
And then Tuesday through Thursday we work in the office through Newcastle, and I can see benefits for both. I really can. You know, I love the freedom of being able to be that little bit more flexible. Like, for example, I'm quite busy, so on my dinners, if I'm working from home, I can go to the gym for 45 minutes and I come back feeling refreshed. But then also the fact of like, we're all in the office together. I love working with people.
Yeah.
If I have a meeting with people, I love having it face to face.
Yeah.
A lot of people, so if I just take this to Cura, I try and do like a lot of my initial conversations in person so they feel like they've got that personal connection. I think it's really valuable that as we go within the next 10 years, I really hope that we don't see the value of connection drop.
Yeah.
Because I love speaking to people. There's nothing better than having a bit crack with your friends over a coffee or over some food, catching up.
And I think it is complete. I think it has completely changed. I think we did have those years of being having to be online for everything, but actually, I think from a business point of view, society is moving back to meeting up with people and doing face to face, meeting for coffees. And I think to me that's what I much prefer, because actually behind a screen you don't. You're there. You do the meeting, and you don't get to know somebody in not in a over friendly way, but kind of you don't you don't get to know people too much. But actually, to do a face to face is just a nice way to be able to just integrate in, isn't it?
Well, people don't open up, do they?
No.
Like online. Like people don't open up online. But, you can meet somebody in person and know whether like they're hiding behind a personality or. Yeah. Whereas over online, you can't do that. Yeah. I think you should be meeting more people in person. Yeah. You should try and meet somebody new every month. Yeah. Or, create a new friendship, because there is real value in friendships and human connection with one another. It's proven that human connections help mental health and help people, do better. Yeah. So when we think about your kind of influences, because obviously you're very driven, you kind of you know where you want to be, you're really working forward, and you've got kind of your plan now. So what's been your driving influence, I suppose, from a parental point of view? Have they shaped and formed opinion, or helped or guided? How's that impacted? They did. I had very good role models within both my parents, my mum and dad, and they really help. I think it does do a lot with your upbringing. And to me, I was almost given enough rope to like where I was able to do my own thing, but just enough rope that if I was slipping out of direction, they wouldn't pull the rope back in, but they would tug on it a little bit and say, is that the right decision, and challenge your thinking. Yeah. And I think every parent should aim to try and challenge the kids' thinking a little bit. When I'm old enough to have children and I'm at that point in my life, it's always a case of like, look, don't tell your kids. Well, my parents never told me what to do. They always just showed by example and led us into a direction that I wanted to go, and just encouraged. Yeah. I don't understand parents who either want the kids to do exactly the same as what they do, or you've got to make the family proud, you've got to do this. Yeah. If you're a Gen Z and you're listening to this and you really want to do something, just put yourself first. Yeah. Just think about what you want to do and what's going to make you happy. Like, at the end of the day, it's your life and you're living it. Do you hear that some friends or people of a similar age to you, that parents are overly involved in what they're doing? Yeah. And kind of trying to shape things too much? Yeah, definitely. Like, I think if Gen Z's had it the way they would, like, university wouldn't be a thing unless it was for the party and going out with friends. Like, unless you're going into STEM, I think a lot of parents do end up pushing kids like either into university because that's what everybody else in the family's done, or they don't know any other route. And that might be the right thing to do. It's just my opinion that I think you should lead by example and wisdom, as opposed to by telling your kids like, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. Because there are quite a lot of stats when we've done some research into it around the amount of parents that turn up for job interviews with their children and stuff. I've seen this. And kind of we're talking like 55% of people take their parents along to the interview, or they'll be involved in the negotiation of a contract with them, or they're contacting the manager on their behalf. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? I'm guessing you're not liking any of that idea, but what's your thoughts on that? I think it just sets the tone for the type of person that they are. Yeah. And I don't think that the parents got any like ill malice by doing it. I think they're only trying to do what they think's best for the kid. Yeah. But yourself as an employer, and I know that like Greg and Lewis, my employers, and I probably think the same. I'll not speak on behalf of Greg and Lewis. I know. I'll speak on behalf of myself. Sorry, take that bit out. But as an employer, if somebody brings a parent or an interview, it's a case of like, you know, they still need the hand holding a little bit, and they're not showing any independence. When you transition from leaving from school into the real, somewhat ugly world, you know, you get hit in the face with reality. It's a case of like, well, my dad can't be there to hold me hand all the time. My mum can't be there to hold me hand all the time. I'm on my own 2 feet now.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've got to fly by yourself. So I don't agree with this.
No.
I don't.
Are you surprised by those type of numbers?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I am. What was it, 50%?
Yeah, 50%.
So that's
take along
that's
to,
one in two people bring the parent or an interview.
But one of the big things that we see from what we do is it's about the parents getting in touch with the worker, you know, like with the manager at work.
What to do with problems?
Yeah. So actually, again, it creates another workplace situation, which is really difficult. Yeah. And some workplaces will engage with the parent, and others won't, you know, because obviously ultimately they're there to be able to carry on and do their work there.
Well, you employ
the individual.
employer. Yeah. You don't employ like the mum and dad.
Yeah. So it's
I'd imagine it is hard.
Very difficult to do.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's
crazy.
So one question I do want to ask you is, what does your version of success look like? So you're doing well now. So let's talk about it. What does success look like for you now, and maybe what does it look like in 5-10 years' time?
So success to me right now is ultimately having a little bit of freedom and being fulfilled in what I do. Every day I want to get up and being happy. And I really believe that, you know, if you're fulfilled in what you do and you're helping people, you know, everything else will come.
Yeah.
The nice car, the nice house. There's also something to agree with. When people say like, oh, I don't do it for just a nice house or just, you know, there is a little bit of it. You wouldn't go to work if you couldn't show a little bit for what you want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, success looks like to me is having a freedom of and being able to have, you know, something that I'm proud of. Every day, like when somebody asks us what I do, I get buzzing because I'm like, you know, I do this. I work for Bumbl, and then I'm now building something on the side.
Yeah.
And there's almost bragging rights in being able to say that.
Yeah. Well, you're proud of who
doing
you are.
Something. Yeah, I'm proud.
You're proud.
So success to me is having a career that I'm proud of and building something that I do, and then the nice house and car on the side. I'll keep that in. But
and do you think that changes? Do you think that's going to change 5 to 10 years time, or do you think that's what actually, you know, to be success in 5-10 years time actually is still to enjoy what you're doing, to kind of engage with everything and be proud of what it is that you're doing with a little bit of money?
Yeah, I've got that in. In 5-10 years' time, it is going to change. You know, your life changes. You come to a different life stage. Yeah, I'm 20, so at 25 and 30, maybe more 30, I might be looking to have kids.
Yeah.
And it's a case of leaving something to them that I'd be proud of. Yeah. You know, that's starting very far in the future, but I want to be able to bring somebody into this world or have somebody in my life that, you know, that I'm proud to share with and be able to provide for them and be able to build something that I can say, you know what, 10 years ago, 20-year-old Lewis, who was sat on that podcast, said this and was like, you know what, like, fair play, you've done it. Yeah, you've made it happen. So success, well, somebody asked us the other day who my role model is and who I aspire, like, who I look up to. Yeah. And my role model's me in 10 years. It is, good. Right?
Yeah.
And because the reason being is that in 10 years' time, I want to be able to say, like, you've done yourself proud and you've set out to achieve something and you've done it.
Yeah. And just out of interest, do you think in like 5 years' time you'll be buying a house, or do you think that's unaffordable or unattainable?
It's actually funny that you say this because I've actually been looking to buy somewhere and look at something, but you know it is really hard. Yeah. And ownership and getting on the property ladder as a 20-year-old is just something that seems very unachievable. Yeah. You look at it and you think like, oh, I need 20 grand for a deposit and then everything else. And I'm not going to get too political, but like with the state of the UK and everything at the minute, they're making it very, very hard for Gen Zs to want to achieve more. Yeah. Because I think like, well, look, I can earn X amount and by the time I get taxed and pay everything and you know, I'm still not going to be able to afford a house until I'm 35. Yeah. And it's hard. Yeah. And that's why, you know, I think you've always got to be doing something to hustle on the side. You've got to be building something in the background and to be able to just give you that little bit of an upper hand. Yeah. To be able to stand out. Well, yeah, because to me, you know, there's equity in the value of the business in 5 to 10 years' time, and I hope that this business is worth X amount in however many years' time. So that's where you look at value in that way, but it's a lot easier to build value within skills than what I do actually think it is by buying a house and having value in a house. That's just more unachievable at the minute.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much for our conversation today, Lewis. There's kind of so many great insights from a point of view from Gen Z about what you're doing and your drive and your determination. Also, just kind of understanding who you are at such a young age, I think is kind of is real eye-opening from point of view of someone my age, which I think is great. And I've got kids your age, so I'll be having a chat with them when I get home tonight. You'll just say sorry to them.
Put them in touch.
Put them in touch so they can get in touch. But I really do appreciate your time. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a great conversation. Thanks.
Great. That is all for this episode of Mind the Generation Gap. I hope you found the conversation as valuable as I did, and it's clear when we actually take the time to listen, the gap between us doesn't feel anywhere near as wide.